Today, I'd like to introduce our agenda for our webinar entitled Let AI Take Your Job, to the next level. So we're going to talk about the World War of application experience of AI and Gen AI, challenges and misconceptions about Gen AI, measuring Gen AI's impact and success, how you can maximize your career growth, and the future of AI and proposal development. And as well as we're going to take your questions and answers. And we ask that you put those questions and answers in chat. Thank you very much. So let's get started. We're going to have a standard cadence to our questions, so it's easier to listen to them when we release our YouTube video. So we're going to start with Dwayne, move to Christian, and then Wendy. So let's start with Dwayne. How long does the average bid and proposal professional take to become proficient in using Gen AI, and what must they learn?
Well, obviously, Brenda, that depends in part on what we consider proficient. The tools themselves are actually somewhat in their infancy. And the truth is that a lot of proposal professionals are already pretty well versed in training in the kinds of work and activity that you have to do to write proposals. So when it gets to actual, developing proficiency, the challenge is how long is it going to take you to actually start using the tools and experiment with them to learn how they fit into your style. Just as everybody probably uses Excel here. Some people use pivot tables and other people still don't have a clue after maybe using the product for 15 or 20 years. So, what you actually need to learn to do and things you're going to discover in today's Wild West, you're going to figure that out on your own. The big thing about becoming proficient is making sure that you have space enough to take the time to learn. It's really challenging to learn AI when you're in the middle of a proposal because you're got 6 other things you're trying to do. And if you're trying to do this for the first time, it's going to frustrate you and actually slow you down. But if you actually have something that's a relatively easy task to do, this can be really relatively quick. And actually in just about after you've become familiar with kind of the lingo and some of the things, how to basically write a prompt. And that all takes about maybe 5 or 10 hours of practice. Putting it to actual work, you'll be surprised once you pick an easy project like helping you develop responses to an RFI or developing an executive summary or something like this. You'll discover very quickly and really understand how the tools work that are available today.
So much, Dwayne. Let's go over to Christian. Christian, how have you adapted your awarded AI tool to ensure it continues facilitating the job of bid and proposals professionals as their implementation matures?
Yeah, great question. So I wish we could come out here and say like we nailed it on the first try. So we've been around for a while. Even like pre-Chat GPT, we had an AI system that we were rolling out. So Awarded AI is actually our second generation platform. So the first platform we had, we were definitely trailblazing AI and trying to take a lot of like gambles and guesses of how proposal professionals would use it. Some of those panned out very correct, which is why we're still around here today and a very widely used tool. Others were very incorrect. So finally, we decided to build a new platform that was based on not just our insights of being proposal professionals, but really our customers and the different types of users. I would say the biggest thing we learned was that there is no one size fits all, right? I think we all can agree with this, that we all like to use different methodologies, different tools, different ways of working. So trying to force people into a new AI only workflow is a recipe for failure. So with the new system, what we really focused on was making it another tool in your tool belt to kind of piggyback off what Dwayne said is it's very hard to come in and disrupt your business operations and try to adopt AI on the fly. So by making it another tool in your tool belt, ultimately it doesn't disrupt any of your operations, but you can use it for quick efficiency boosts when the time permits, rather than kind of disrupt those tight deadlines that you already have. A second thing that we really learned was obviously it's on everyone's mind, which is what's AI going to do for my job, especially when it can write extremely quickly, some pretty good content. So the way we actually designed it was to come in and be like a personal subject matter expert, a personal assistant for everyone. So we'll talk more about it, but I think that's a big paradigm shift that it's important for proposal professionals to understand, which is, up until now, it probably wasn't very cost effective for your company to give every single person their own personal assistant, their own personal intern, right? Someone to work with. Now with AI and its commoditization, where it is very affordable for any size business, you virtually can have your own subject matter expert at kind of your call whenever you need them. Same with your own personal assistant, right? Whether you have them do a huge amount of work or just be there to bounce ideas off of when you need them, that's kind of where we see the new paradigm shift moving, where everyone has their own personal AI assistant they can use at any time.
Thanks. And Christian, while you were speaking, I saw several hands raised. I just want to remind our viewers to write your questions in the chat function, and we will make sure we get to them at the end of the presentation. So thank you so much. Wendy, can you share a real world example of how a company used Gen AI to enhance its proposal development? And you please don't mention the company, but tell about their experience.
Well,
thank you.
I mean, sound check. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. So many ways. I mean, I'm going to just throw out like two radically, kind of different examples. One of them had to do with a team that was getting ready for a recompete. And of course, everybody wanted to start with the old proposal, and the company policy was, no, you cannot do that. We're not creating narrative now. We just want an outline with the main points. So this was like a 300-page proposal, but I used Word AI to break it down basically into an annotated outline. It went through section. I had to feed it, in pieces, but it went section by section and created an outline according to what we thought the RFP was going to look like. And that was so hugely helpful, because to do that manually would have taken forever. I will say there were some errors. Whenever you get into levels and headings and outlines and things like that, there can be some hiccups, but it was still such a big time saver. Another instance where a number of my clients are using it constantly is to generate ideas for when we're solutioning. It's so much easier to give the solution team some suggestions. What are some best practices? What are some other examples of how you might do this? If I'm trying to explain this, what would be a good analogy? All kinds of creative things like that. Not that most of them survived. A lot of them didn't. That wasn't the point. The point was it got people talking. It got people engaged in the discussion. And if you've ever been in a solution session and you start asking questions and you just get this resounding silence and you have a blank PowerPoint that you're sharing, that is a horrible experience. And I don't think anybody ever has to do that again. I think you can now always start with something. It probably won't survive because everything is so contextual, but just as a discussion starter, I think it is so helpful for that.
So much, Wendy. Let's go on to our next question here about challenges and misconceptions. So back to Dwayne here. What misconceptions do you find students and customers have about integrating AI into their proposal development activities?
Well, boy, we could talk all day on that one, but we'll kind of summarize here. Probably the first and foremost, people need to understand that it's a tool to assist you and not do your job for you. AI itself, regardless of the large language model you might be using for generative AI, actually doesn't know anything. But it has a lot of algorithms that help it understand how words fit together in compelling ways and deep and meaningful ways. So it can talk quite a bit like it actually knows what it's talking about. So people will get very frustrated because they think they're going to generate some great and compelling information, and yet they actually haven't given the model anything to work with. So you actually, if you want to get good content out of AI, what you've got to do is give it some good content to work with. And you can't just rely on what its general training was, because it wasn't probably trained on your information, your specific knowledge. And because it wasn't, it's not going to give you an answer that's specific to you. But if you learn how to feed it information through the prompting protocols that are being used today, it can, in fact, turn out and generate some great stuff. But you have to remember, it's as Christian kind of alluded to, it's really more like an intern or perhaps one of your technical performers who may be a superstar on the job with the customer, who's coming in to help write a proposal and hasn't really done it before. It may know, AI may appear to know a lot about the topics and things, but it doesn't necessarily know how to put that stuff together. It does not know what's more important than other things. And there are a lot of things here that still require human interaction in order to get to exactly what you're looking for. If you want something that's kind of good, like, for example, using Gen AI for art, if you want something that's generally about something, you can describe a picture and you'll get something beautiful. But if you want something where you've got something exactly in a particular place and time, it's very hard for Gen AI to do that. So you've got to remember its limitations, because it has many of them. But the rule of thumb that I have found helps the students that I work with and the clients that I work with is treat it like it's a good intern or it's a functional person who doesn't really know proposals, and understand you've got to give it that kind of level of instruction, and it will work real well for you.
Dwayne, let's go over to Christian here. Christian, what misconceptions do clients have about using your tool? And how do you guide them towards successful implementation? I'm sure you've seen a lot.
Yeah, and I'll keep it broad, so not just our tool, but to kind of piggyback on what Dwayne and Wendy both said. AIs definitely make mistakes, right? But so do humans. So it's just like, a human, where humans make mistakes, human makes things up, right? So do these AIs. And it's very important to understand that they're not going to be always 100% accurate. That's why they're not going to take your job. They have huge flaws that require a human to be kind of that pilot and treat the AI like that co-pilot, that assistant. But some of the most common misconceptions we hear all the time, not to go too technical, but is around data privacy and just how that actually works. So behind the scenes, there's something called a large language model. A large language model, you can think about it as like the engine. Without the engine, your car is not going to move. Now, the way these things work is they're not actually learning in real time, regardless of how it might seem in that way. The truth is, large language models are what's called stateless. That's a technical term for the fact that once you finish training them, that lid is sealed and that's their training data. Not to go down this technical rabbit hole, there's algorithms that can facade it and kind of trick it into that. But what happens is people use like public AI tools that are training on your data, or they hear that these AIs are going to train on my data. It's not real-time training, and that's also why it's very dangerous, because what's happening is if you leak a bunch of proprietary information into a public tool that's using your data for training, it's not coming out in real time, right? So if I leak it, Dwayne can't go find it right away. What happens is they take it and they use it for training future models. So 6 months, 12 months down the road, that's where that information is being used for training. And that's where your information can start to be leaked. So it's not a real-time effect, which kind of throws people off. They think that these models are constantly learning. It's just not the truth. That's one big misconception we hear. Another one is around complexity. So I think over time we've kind of thought about like data analytics and Power BI and traditional AI to be very complex, hard to work with, hard to use. And that was true. I think the nicest thing about the era of AI that we're in right now with generative AI is it's powered by natural language. What that means is the same way you talk to a human is the same way you talk to one of these AI systems. So ultimately, the same way I would ask, Wendy, or I'd ask Dwayne a question is the same exact way I would structure that question to the AI. There's no right or wrong way. The more detail I give, just like the more detail I give to, Wendy, the better the response is going to be. So there is virtually no right or wrong way to talk to them. And then the last one, which I'll kind of bring up around misconceptions, is executive expectations versus reality. We see this all the time, especially with more and more people pushing out these like wildly inaccurate metrics they claim they can do. These metrics, or these executives, they read these metrics, they go take these demos of people, promising the world, and these executives expect, my proposal team's going to crank a proposal out in, 5 minutes first day using the tool. It's just not the truth, right? You can get huge revolutionary efficiency gains, but it takes time to get yourself to that point. So we see a huge kind of disconnect right now between what people are trying to tell these executive teams they can expect right off the bat and what the actual true result is.
Interesting. Thanks, Christian. Wendy, what are your main concerns when advising clients on AI implementation, and what risks do you work with them to mitigate?
Well, a lot, echo everything that Dwayne and Kristen said, in terms of people having unrealistic expectations, and the privacy issue is obviously a big one. So you can't control what people are going to do. You can tell them not to use ChatGPT, but anybody can pull it up and use it. So so really driving home why that's not a good idea and why you really need your own enclave for proprietary information. It just seems so easy to do it, to do it in the public domain, if you don't want to pay for the license, or if you're just in a hurry to do something. So I try to emphasize that a lot. The productivity issue definitely is a big one. It so depends on what you're using it for, how productive it's going to be for you. The more complicated the job, the longer it's going to take to get to the place where you can actually even measure the change in productivity. And there is something else about this that I think we haven't really touched on. That in terms of the time it takes to really understand how the tool is going to be productive for you, that's not just person hours, right? So if you say that it takes, I'm just going to throw a number out there, it takes 20 hours before you're really comfortable getting the tool to write a resume the way you want the resume rewritten. You can't achieve that 20 hours by working 10 hours a day for 2 days. You need elapsed time because knowledge is experiential. And so it's so much better, like with so many other things, to do it for 30 minutes a day, right? For a number of days, a number of weeks, than it is to try to compress it. Because learning how to use the tool for whatever situation is most productive for your organization just takes time. So the risk in terms of expectations, is that it's going to happen really fast. Probably not. It's going to be really easy to measure the productivity. Probably not. I work on those risks, a fair amount. And, that's just, it's a learning curve, and learning takes time. So I think those would be the biggest ones. And I like the idea of a personal assistant. I kind of try to adjust expectations so that people see whatever the tool generates as a first draft. And so the other biggest risk is that what comes out does not get carefully checked. I mean, even if you're just asking it to take 5 paragraphs of text and turn that into a checklist that you're going to use for compliance, somebody still has to go side by side with that first draft and the RFP, the solicitation, the PWS, whatever it is, to make sure it's accurate. So I always tell people to never, ever, ever turn in anything to anybody else that comes out of the tool without having checked it very carefully.
Good words, Wendy. Let's talk about measuring AI's impact and success right now. So first, we're going to go to Dwayne here. In your training sessions, Dwayne, how do you guide professionals in measuring the impact of AI on their proposal processes? And are there specific metrics or outcomes they should focus on?
Well, right now, the vast majority of the folks that we're training are pretty new to AI. They may have experimented with it some on their own. They may be considering purchasing an AI tool. Their company may have just gotten a tool and they want folks to kind of get some more detailed training. So we're working mostly at this point at getting people familiar enough with the tools so that they can begin to assess how they might be useful
Hello,
for
Laura speaking.
their particular business situation. And what we really try to emphasize, because it is some of the things really that Christian and Wendy were just talking about, like the fact that you've got if you give it basic information or no information, you're going to get something that's a wonderful draft, but don't count on it. Or you might get some really surprising answers. In my classes, because you got to have a sense of humor once in a while. I named the imaginary technical services company that I use in training, Joe's Fish Taco Stand, which has absolutely nothing, obviously, to do with IT or professional services, etc. And actually, in this last class, which I mean, I've done this on several classes, and yet in this last class, the generative AI tool, when we're doing an analysis of for compliance on something, said that gave me a low compliance score because Joe's Fish Taco Stand is clearly in the food services business and not in the administrative support services business. Wow, who knew? The point is that the AI is very creative and things, but first we need to kind of get a handle on what the tools are. There are great opportunities for productivity, but I think first people have to understand how these tools work before you can start deciding how they're going to be effective. I do know that, and an example I share in the class regularly is my first time I actually tried to use AI on a real customer situation. It was writing an executive summary to share on an opportunity with potential teaming partners for a client. We had been working a year on capture, and we decided it was time to start bringing in teaming partners. So we wanted to be able to explain the deal, what our anticipated team was going to bring to the table, and therefore, by extension, where these people might fit in. And with all of the material that we had gathered over a year, it took me about 3 hours to write that executive summary, which would have normally taken me about 10 minimum, probably 20 to 25 hours to write. So, and that demonstrated to me, in fact, I became a real convert after that. Once I understood that, wow, I can actually save a lot of time. It put together, oh, and by the way, like Wendy said, it actually offered a couple of ideas when analyzing our information that we didn't even have in terms of our approach. So there were a lot of great things that it did to stimulate conversation within our team. And 3 hours, again, that was probably about 6 drafts, if you will, in that 3 hours of going back and forth. But we generated something really useful. And that becomes a good benchmark for, we were writing 3 pages and it took us 3 hours. That's about what it takes a good writer to write a page also, when they have all the information they need. But the great thing is we got some insights and we got something that wasn't just, if you will, pink team ready. This was really red team ready. So roundabout answer there, but the key is first get to know the tools, and then you'll start to understand how to evaluate them for your company.
That was a pretty interesting new benchmark you had there. So let's go to Christian. Christian, how does your company measure the effectiveness of its AI tool in improving proposal outcomes? And can you share any examples or stories that demonstrate its success?
Yeah. touchy subject for me. I'm very touchy when it comes to metrics because of, again, like the wild metrics people are throwing out there is like clickbait to try to pull you in. One being like P-win. I think as proposal professionals, we all know how difficult it is to actually like calculate a true P-win, over and over and over. And then again, you'll go to these websites and people are telling you, 900% increase to your P-win. And it's just backed by nothing. So there's a lot of metrics out there that I would kind of raise an eyebrow to see like how are they actually predicting that. One that's pretty obvious is increased volume, right? So how many more proposals can you respond to now using AI versus before using AI? We're doing some interesting case studies right now because I love to put like the metrics, to an actual number, to an actual customer. So we're doing some where we're actually gauging, working with these customers to identify how long did it take you to do an RFI response, right? Now, the first time using AI, after one training, how long did it take you now? And then 4 weeks later, and then 6 weeks later, and then 6 months later, right? So we can actually get like a true velocity of showing like the actual, backable kind of metrics of what that increase could look like. But without a doubt, right? If you can come in there and you use it to respond to, 10x more proposals, how many proposals were you doing before, right? It's very hard to kind of gauge that. Productivity is an easy one to kind of see, right? For certain use cases, again, people coming in trying to automate like an RFP response right off the bat, that's a very difficult use case, a very high risk use case as well. But if you're using it to like write an email, you can see a huge productivity gain when you tell it like a very basic kind of prompt, and it spits out a very structured formal email for you in 2 seconds. Increased win rates. Obviously, you can track that, but again, it comes back down to like one success story we have is one customer, we were just looking at their USA spending the other day, so all public data. They were an early adopter of our tool since like the very early days. And this year they over 2x'd their award revenue, right? Now, can I say that was all because of like our AI? I could, pretend and try to take like all the fame for that, but this is there's a lot of factors that go into it, right? They have a very strong team. They have differentiated solutions. They have strong past performances. One thing they do have though is a lot of early adopters of AI that have been using it for a very long time. Because as Dwayne mentioned, there's a lot more than just using it to build a first draft very quickly. Yes, that's a use case you can get to fairly quick, but also like the more unique ones are having it spot like differentiation strategies, insights, weaknesses, right? Areas to improve in. That's where you kind of get, in my opinion, the most success out of it. Time savings, I think Wendy kind of alluded to this. Yes, like you can get huge time savings. Sometimes you can get 50% time savings. Sometimes you can get 99% time savings. Other times you only get 10% time savings. So it really depends on like the type of task and is AI the right tool for that task. That's going to be kind of telling towards like the actual metrics that you can expect on the outcome.
Christian. Wendy, what benchmarks or key performance indicators would you recommend professionals use to assess the value and impact of AI in their proposal development efforts?
Well, at the risk of alienating a lot of people in this session, I don't think our profession does a very good job of measuring things without AI. So I don't think for most tasks we really have a good baseline. And so I don't know how you're going to measure productivity gains with AI unless you have that baseline. So I think the best way to get to that place is to start with something relatively simple, relatively mechanical, and get some good measurements of really what does it take a human to get from point A to point B, from having a street resume and some notes that update that resume to a resume that's formatted to suit a particular RFP. That's from the street resume all the way to the finished draft that everybody finds acceptable. So I think you just have to invest the time in figuring out how long it takes a human to do it, and then work with the tool and get your first draft out of the tool, see how many revisions you have to go through. The measuring part is a little bit cumbersome, I think, to really understand that. I know there's industry metrics that it takes for somebody, this many hours to write this many pages. In fact, life doesn't work like that. You know, the writer has a personal emergency. They're gone for a week. You have to bring somebody else in. It's just not linear. So I really think you need some good solid measurements, and it can be time consuming and expensive to get those. So I would say start with some things that are relatively small and discrete and easy to measure, and then work up from there in terms of complexity. I haven't seen many organizations develop good KPIs. I think very much for this reason, and for what Christian alluded to, is that the outcomes are correlated, but there's not necessarily causation.
Good advice, Wendy. Let's go to our next topic here. This is maximizing your career growth. Now, let's go up to Dwayne. How can business professionals use AI to take their careers to the next level? The actual title of this presentation. What training or development opportunities should they pursue?
Well, that's great. We have to remember first and foremost that our profession as proposal writers is about communication and communicating. Our job is to create a meaningful message that will resonate with our intended audience. And AI can help you do that. It can help you understand your audience. It can give you ideas on how to do things. So one thing I would encourage is that you continue your professional development and learn how to be a better communicator, period. That doesn't have anything to do with AI. Do use AI where you have an opportunity to take AI classes and things. Please do so. There's a lot of nuance, and you have to understand the strengths and the weaknesses of the tool. This will come through experiential work, as Wendy has said. And just to clarify, Wendy's point about 10 hours versus 20 half-hour sessions is the fact that while the amount of time you're taking to do something is important, it is in fact through repetition that we really learn. One of the things in a marketing class I took once said you have to be exposed to something 9 times before you even really begin to notice it. So that's why it's not enough just to invest a raw bulk amount of time. It's important to invest periodically over time in order to gain things here. And make sure that when you're doing things that I've got a note here to myself. You have to, when you're looking at AI and how to use it, try to understand in the training you're taking about AI and advancing the various tools, always be looking at what is it that are the strengths and the weaknesses of these tools, so that you understand where they can actually help you. Probably the thing that AI has not been able to do is evaluate things. Yes, it can be an idea generator, and it can actually look and say, does this, if you will, correlate with that? You can put in stuff and ask it to do a red team evaluation, for example. But really, it treats everything the same, where we actually need to provide not just evaluation, but judgment. Okay, that's what AI really can't do for us today. It cannot really judge things. So you have to learn at what point, the human needs to be involved. And that also, I guess, it ultimately gets back to our how to be productive conversations and answers that we've all been having, is that there's still a role for human judgment in everything. So learning the tools and understanding their strengths and their abilities in whatever direction that you want to try to use the tools, always look at where is the human judgment come in. That's why it's a great idea generator, but not necessarily a great idea picker. So that's what you want to focus on in your career. How can I understand these tools so I can figure out how to make them work for me as I grow in my ability to communicate?
Good advice, Dwayne. Let's go over to Christian. Christian, what advice would you give to professionals looking to integrate AI into their workflows or improve their proposal and advance their careers?
Yeah, so Dwayne said something, I wrote it down quick, which is the 12 repetitions to learn something. Very true. So like in my military background, the Marine Corps, we call it muscle memory. So very, very similar, which is they kind of just like burn it into your brain and make you do repetitions over and over and over until it becomes like a second nature. That is very important for AI. And why it's important is once you start to understand like how these AIs actually like respond and what a good response looks like versus a bad response, once you start to master that, you'll start to very easily be able to detect, that looks like a hallucination. I need to fact check that. I need to review that further. Another thing is when working with these AI systems, I'm sure a lot of you have used ChatGPT. When they come out with a response, that's not the final response you need to go with, right? It's very easy to tell the AI, just like you would tell an intern, nope, that's not right. Here's some more information, correct yourself, right? And it's going to go and iterate on that response. So it comes back down to that muscle memory that Dwayne was talking about is learning how to quickly do that where it becomes second nature for you to quickly realize, okay, the AI is in the wrong direction. Let me reset it. Let me put it in the right direction. But as far as like some good advice that I would share for proposal professionals is to start now. So if you haven't used ChatGPT, definitely go out there and start to research, understand what it is, watch some videos, play around with very basic, low risk use cases, probably outside of work. Go like do something around like your personal life or hobbies just to kind of play with it and see what we're actually talking about and how these AIs work. Next thing I would say is start small. So like we always say, crawl, walk, run. The biggest thing is identify use cases. Don't try to boil the ocean. Trying to boil the ocean is a recipe for failure. What I mean by that is coming in and trying to use the AI to do an executive summary and an outline and a compliance matrix and a first draft and a second draft and review for compliance, right? That is boiling the ocean, and that is a quick way to kind of overwhelm yourself and get very poor results. Instead, focus on like key use cases, try to master those use cases, learn how it can do different things for those use cases, and then start to expand from there. I would also say, pick a reputable vendor. Again, avoid these exaggerated claims. You're going to see them if you haven't already seen them. I can say this because on our website, we actually can detect who's going to it and who's scraping it. And we've seen a couple companies now almost like scrape our exact website, spin up a new website, pretending to do all the same stuff. And the truth is they can't even touch kind of like near that functionality. Why I bring that up is because it's kind of like a gold mine in a lot of people's eyes right now, which is they see a quick way to kind of make some money by going out there and trying to get you to sign up for a year-long subscription. Be very cautious of that. The most important kind of resource we have as proposal professionals is our time, right? We're constantly working on a deadline. We constantly know another deadline's coming up. So don't invest your time into a company that's just trying to get rich quick and is going to walk away as soon as, Bitcoin comes back or some new kind of fad comes in that they want to go pursue. And then last thing I would say for your career growth, continuous learning, right? This probably goes without saying. I think everyone understands this, but webinars like these, webinars across the industry, targeted for proposal professionals, very important. Just keep absorbing that information. AI moves so fast that, a year ago when I was sitting here talking to the same audience, a lot of major changes have taken place since then. Ebooks, learning, various certifications, trainings, like Dwayne's course. That's a great one to go take because that is targeted specifically for proposal professionals. There's a big difference between like generic AI tools and very targeted AI tools for very specific use cases. And then the very last thing I would say is prompting. Prompting is, in my opinion, is not going anywhere. Prompting is the way you talk to these AIs and the way you get them to actually respond. Again, it's driven by natural language. So a prompt is pretty much you typing and also talking at this point to these AIs, just like you talk to a human, and that's how they respond to you. There's a term called prompt engineering, which is just a fancy way of structuring these prompts and giving them additional details and instructions. Don't be scared by the term engineering, right? Don't let that like sway you away from learning this because it's very important to learn basic prompting and then some advanced prompting techniques as well. And just because it says engineering, again, don't be fooled. You don't need to learn calculus and all these complex equations to try to, adopt prompting. It's actually very simple because again, it's the same way you talk to a human. So I'd say that's probably the key career advice.
Christian, let's go over to Wendy. Wendy, you are a leader in this field. What is the most important takeaway for bidding proposals for professionals regarding the use of AI in their work? How can they position themselves to thrive in an AI-enhanced industry?
Well, I want to just piggyback on what Christian was saying about prompt engineering. You know, I mean, people don't necessarily think about it this way, but the large language models are actually pretty good at helping you write a prompt. And so often when I'm in a situation and I don't really know how to structure the prompt, I get very good advice from the large language model as to how to do it. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around that. Like, why, if they know how to write the prompt, why can't they just answer my question? But anyway, they don't. So I definitely think that experimentation is super important with that. And again, continuing to learn how to talk to the models. Ironically, I think that one way proposal professionals can really use these tools is outside of work. I had to give a presentation to my book group, and one of the large language models analyzed 2 chapters of an early 18th century French novel in relation to the book. They said, I said, how do these 2 chapters relate to all the themes in the book? And this book is still in print, but it's not very popular. And I was just amazed at the level of detail. And I would say 2/3 of what it gave me was really, really good. And I know that would have taken me most of my weekend to figure that out. So I think there's lots of things we can use it for in our personal life that will make us more productive, because our mind isn't full of clutter thinking, I should be doing this, I need to get ready for the book group, and so on and so forth. I also think in terms of staying informed, that there's many different ways to do that. And there's people learn in different ways. Some people like to listen, some people like to watch YouTube, some people like to read. I do all of them. The Wall Street Journal just a couple of days ago had a whole special section on the future of AI. And that's one of the reasons that I think it's important to stay on top of what's going on in the industry at a high level. If you try to keep track of everything, you're like Christian talked about boiling the ocean. You're not going to be an expert in AI. Nobody's an expert in AI. It's changing every 12 hours. But if you can be aware at a high level of what's going on, you'll have a sense of where it can help you and where it's not going to be productive. So as I understand what's coming down the pipe, as just one example, today, we can use AI to help us write a data call for our subs. In the future, the AI tool will send the data call, will review the data call, will go back to the subs and say, you missed these 5 things. So it will actually start executing as opposed to just spitting out words to us. And those are the kind of trends that I think it's really important to be aware of, so that you understand how mature they are. You don't try to adopt them ahead of time, but you get them at the right point when you actually can use them in your organization. I think those would be some of my takeaways in terms of career success.
One last question for the group, but I asked you to answer these questions very succinctly, because we have a lot of people raising their hands asking questions. So Dwayne, like 1 or 2 sentences, how do you envision the role of AI evolving in the next few years within proposal development? What skills should bid and proposal professionals focus on to stay ahead?
Oh, this is actually kind of a variation on the last 2 questions here that I got answered, kind of shoved together. So just to recap, you're a communicator, so continue to develop your communication skills and understand and study AI with an eye toward how you can use it to communicate. It's important to remember that generative AI wants to create but it has very little actual judgment. And if it doesn't actually know something, it will make things up. So it's really important to understand the tool and figure out how it'll fit into your workflow. There are a lot of different ways, but always remember that you need to check the work and that there's no substitute for human judgment and placing value and priorities on things. So if you go about your education with that in mind, you'll discover lots of great ways and tools and things that people have to make things work. And because you want to be short, I will stop there.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, this goes to Christian. What advancements in AI technology do you anticipate will further transform the proposal process? And how are you and your company preparing for those changes?
Yep. So this kind of comes back to what I said originally, is my job is kind of to absorb as much information about AI as possible and then try to take gambles and bets on where it's kind of moving and then build tools for proposal professionals. But I think it's very obvious generative AI is going to change virtually every industry and just about every process, whether it's immediate or whether it's over time. It's coming, regardless of what we like or what we think. I think the biggest thing, the advancement again, is going to be where we're very bullish on AI becoming your personal assistant, where in the previous world, it was not cost effective for your company or for you to hire a personal assistant to help you anytime you need it. Now it is very cost effective. It's very easy. And you can kind of tune that personal assistant to your preferences, your styles, your tones. You can give them, a call at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. when you need them most, and that AI is going to be there for you. So I think that is a big kind of paradigm shift that's going to happen where every single person now will have access to their own personal assistant that's powered by AI. That's going to help with collaboration. It's going to help with brainstorming, faster answers. Overall, it's going to help like reduce the feedback loop. I think we all can resonate with when you send an email to someone and you need that answer ASAP and you don't get the answer for 12 hours, 24 hours, 36 hours later. I think that's going to keep getting minimized because now AI can help you get that quick answer. And then certain systems like ours can actually citate where those answers come from. So you can actually help combat those hallucinations. Now, back to the gambling side of the house, which is where I think AI is moving. A couple things that I think are coming very quickly is something called like agentic architectures. So, not to go too technical, what that means. Today, most AI systems are single agent, which means that you're chatting with one AI and it's giving you back an answer. I think soon we're going to see where you're chatting with multiple AIs at once in the same thread so they can kind of bounce ideas off of each other. So instead of having one smart AI assistant or intern, you could have 5 smart AI assistants and interns that are talking amongst each other before they give you back an answer. And that's just going to kind of increase the accuracy of that result that comes back. I think human in the loop systems, which is where we're currently at today, where humans are the ones in control, AIs are your co-pilots. I think that's going to remain for the distant future where human needs to control these AIs. It needs to be the master telling it what data to use, giving it the detail, the instructions, and then obviously always reviewing the results that come back from it. And then the last one, which I'm pretty bullish on right now and pretty exciting because we're rolling something out around this, is voice. So AI voice is moving very quickly. I think voice is very frictionless. What I was saying was, you can type in these prompts, and typically it's always been typing of prompts. But now voice, I think, is going to come in and be very like prevalent as far as people adopting it, which is you tell the AI just like you're talking to it on the phone what you want it to do, what you want it to review. Have it read the executive summary back to you so you can actually hear it through like the lens of someone reading it like a story and then instantly telling it, make this a little bit shorter, make this a little more informative, a little more exciting, and instantly it's going to correct itself. So very bullish on voice. I think voice is going to start to pop up more and more in these AI systems, and it's going to be a new way of just interacting with it, which again is very frictionless and also very easy to adopt and use for virtually any technical level.
That is so interesting. I can't wait to see that. I'm sure if anyone wants a demo, maybe one of your people can put a link to that in the chat. Okay. Last but not least, Wendy, bring us home. What emerging trends do you foresee in AI's impact on the proposal industry? How can professionals prepare themselves for the evolving nature of AI in this field?
Well, one thing we haven't talked about is the recipients of our proposal and how they're using AI. There's been a couple of articles in Contract Management Magazine and some other publications about this. We're starting to see things about AI in RFPs, that you're not allowed to use AI in creating your response, or if you do use AI, you have to disclose it. Of course, you could argue that Grammarly is AI, so the definition is so broad that these restrictions seem pretty meaningless. But everybody knows, that in schools and universities, professors and teachers are on guard for people using material generated by AI. So I think it's going to be important to stay on top of what's going on in the government and state, local government, commercial buyers, whoever is the target of our proposals, and figure out what sort of countermeasures or detection technologies they might be using, and always keep that in the back of our minds. But I agree with everything that Dwayne said about the importance of communication and staying on top of the field.
Thank you. At this point, we've come to the Q&A, and we have lots of questions here. And we will make sure that you get answers to these Q&A in our APMP Chesapeake Chapter emails, and you'll see them, some of them in our YouTube. So let's start out right here. Right. Oh, here we have a question here, and just jump in, one person answer it. Is APMP or any other entity building a list of AI prompts? Wendy, I'm going to give that one to you. Have you heard anything about that?
I think somebody answered this in the chat.
But there are, I think one at the APMP conference in New Orleans, they mentioned they were working on that. The thing that we have to be aware, though, whenever you're using prompts that other people developed, I mean, they're often kind of generic, and it still is going to require a lot of information from you. This gets into the whole business of prompt engineering that Christian was talking about. In order to really have a great prompt, having a framework for that prompt is great, but you still have to supply specific information in order to really get the kind of results you're looking for. So use those kinds of tip books or canned prompts as starting points and ideas, but don't expect you're going to get a result just by running somebody else's prompt.
This question is from David. Wendy, what prompts do you use to get AI to generate ideas for solutions?
Well, that depends entirely on where the team is and what they need. So there's been times when I've taken a topic and I've done a little bit of research, and then I ask the tool for the latest developments and best practices in the industry. I ask what competitors are likely to be doing around that topic. There's lots of different ways to get the discussion started. Again, I love to use it to take a very, very technical topic, and I say, explain this the way I would explain it to my 96-year-old mother. And it does an amazingly good job at that. So it really depends on the departure point, on how technical the material is, on the audience for the bid, what I use it for. I think if you experiment with it, you'll find out what works best for the team that you're with.
Yeah, I would just piggyback on that real quick, is that another very cool way of using it is ask the AI how it can help you. I think a lot of people don't realize this, but these AIs are pretty self-aware of what they actually are and what they can and can't do. So like you could give it a block of text and say, analyze this, and simply, here's your prompt. Tell me how you can help me. And the AI is going to spit out a bunch of ideas of how it can help you. And then it's just going down the rabbit hole of which one's the most kind of relevant to your use case. It's a very easy way to get started. Very easy. Again, just ask it point blank. how can you help me on this, and just copy and paste in what you're looking for help on.
Just want to let everyone know we will answer any questions we haven't touched on in chat. You can get a copy of this recording. It will be on APMP Chesapeake Chapter's YouTube channel.